The question of death has always lingered in the hearts of humanity. Why do we fear it so deeply? Why does the end of life bring such dread, uncertainty, and sorrow? The Buddha, more than 2,500 years ago, offered a timeless answer that continues to guide millions across the world today. His wisdom does not speak of fear, but of awakening. It does not speak of endings, but of transformation. In this journey together, we will travel through the history of Buddhism, the lives of those who shaped it, the beauty of its practices, and the eternal message that shines even in our modern lives. Let us walk into the light of compassion, mindfulness, and truth, and discover why death need not be a shadow, but rather a doorway to peace. Long ago, in ancient India, during a time of kingdoms, rituals, and wandering philosophers, a prince named Siddhartha Gautama left behind his palace walls in search of answers. He had everything: wealth, comfort, luxury, but within him a deep unease stirred. He saw sickness, old age, and death, and realized that no riches could shield anyone from life's impermanence. That realization set him on a path that changed the course of human history. For years he wandered, studied with great teachers, and practiced severe austerities, but still the truth eluded him. Finally, under the shade of the Bodhi tree in Bodh Gaya, he sat in meditation with a vow. He would not rise until he understood the root of human suffering. What followed was enlightenment, radiant awakening in which he saw life not as a trap, but as a continuous flow. He realized that fear of death comes from clinging, from the illusion that we are separate from the great web of existence. From that moment, the Buddha's life became a message of compassion, teaching that liberation was possible for all beings. The early days of Buddhism spread through humble footsteps. The Buddha walked from village to village, teaching farmers, kings, merchants, and monks with the same gentleness. His words reached beyond class, beyond wealth, beyond boundaries. Great disciples like Ananda, Sariputta, and Mahakasyapa carried forward his message of wisdom. After the Buddha's passing, councils were held where his words were remembered and recited with devotion, becoming the foundation of the Buddhist scriptures. Emperor Ashoka of India, moved by the Dharma, became a powerful protector of Buddhism. He sent monks across Asia to Central Asia, and later to China, Korea, Japan, and beyond. The seeds planted in ancient soil grew into vast forests of philosophy and culture, shaping the spiritual destiny of nations. Each region absorbed the teachings in its own way. Tibetan Buddhism embraced deep ritual and meditation. Zen in Japan emphasized simplicity and direct experience, while Theravada in Southeast Asia held tightly to the earliest teachings. Each was unique, yet all carried the same truth: freedom from fear and suffering through awakening. In today's world, the life of a Buddhist is both ordinary and extraordinary. The air with a vibration of peace. They walk barefoot for alms, a practice not of poverty, but of humility and connection to the community. In homes, families bow before shrines with offerings of flowers, incense, and light, symbols of impermanence and purity. Rituals like meditation, chanting sutras, and observing mindfulness are woven into daily living. Celebrating the Buddha's birth, enlightenment, and passing bring people together in joy, reflection, and gratitude. For many lay followers, Buddhism is not only a religion, but a way of life, showing kindness to a neighbor, refraining from harm, and practicing patience in the midst of chaos. At its heart, it teaches that spirituality does not demand escape from the world, asks us to live fully in it, with clarity and compassion. The philosophy itself is radiant in its simplicity, yet profound in its depth. The Four Noble Truths form the foundation that life contains suffering, that suffering arises from craving and attachment, that there is a way to end this suffering, and that this path is the noble eightfold path of right understanding, right action, right speech, and right mindfulness, among others. At the core is compassion, the wish for all beings to be free from pain and loving kindness, the radiant practice of extending goodwill without condition. The Buddha taught that all things are impermanent, ever-changing, like clouds drifting in the sky. To fear death is to forget that life itself is a flow, that endings and beginnings are inseparable. He urged us to look deeply into our own minds, to see that we are not merely bodies destined for decay, but part of an unbroken cycle of existence. Fear dissolves when we understand that death is not an enemy, but a natural continuation, like a wave returning to the ocean. In that realization, we find balance, serenity, courage to live more fully. And today, centuries later, Buddhism continues to shape the modern world in ways both subtle and profound. Mindfulness practices rooted in Buddhist meditation are now embraced in hospitals, schools, and workplaces across the globe. The gentle wisdom of the Buddha has entered psychology, helping people heal from anxiety and stress. Concepts like compassion, gratitude, and interdependence are influencing social change, encouraging more sustainable and harmonious ways of living. From the serene temples of Thailand to the meditation centers in New York and London, the Dharma continues to light the path, even in the chaos of modern society. People discover that the Buddha's message is not about withdrawing from life, but about facing it with a fearless heart. Death, once seen as a terror, becomes a teacher, minding us to cherish each breath, each moment, and each connection with love. So, why do we fear death so much? Because we cling to what we think is ours. Because we forget that we are part of something vast and eternal. But the Buddha's timeless answer invites us to let go, to see life not as possession, but as gift. When we live with compassion, when we embrace impermanence, when we understand that all beings share the same journey, death loses its sting. It becomes not the end, but a transformation. And in that realization, we no longer live in fear. We live in freedom. The Buddha's voice still whispers across centuries. Do not be afraid. Walk the path of kindness. See the truth of impermanence, and discover within your own heart the peace that no death can take away. Long ago, more than 2,500 years in the past, the world of India was alive with rituals, sacred chants, and countless philosophies about the nature of life. Kings and sages sought answers through ceremonies, sacrifices, and debates. But one man-prince, Siddhartha Gautama, looked at life with a deeper longing. He was born into comfort, into a palace where every desire was satisfied. Yet, he felt something missing. As a young man, he stepped outside the golden walls of his home and was struck by what he saw: sickness, old age, and death. These sights shattered the illusion of security he had known. Suddenly, the silk and gold of his palace meant nothing, for he realized that no one could escape the truth of impermanence. This moment of awakening was not yet enlightenment, but it was the spark that set him on his path. He left behind his family, his riches, his kingdom, and began to search for the answer to suffering. He studied with great teachers who taught him meditation and deep concentration. He practiced severe austerities, fasting until his body was nothing but bones and skin. Yet still, the truth eluded him. One night, weak but determined, he sat under the shade of a Bodhi tree in the quiet town of Bodh Gaya. He vowed, "I will not rise from this seat until I have discovered the truth that ends all sorrow." Days passed in deep meditation as doubts, fears, and even visions of temptation tried to shake him. And then, as dawn broke and the morning star rose, Siddhartha awakened. He saw reality as it truly is, that all things are impermanent, that clinging to desires and illusions creates suffering, and that liberation is possible in that moment. He became the Buddha, the awakened one. His realization was not a philosophy of despair, but of radiant hope. He understood that death itself is not the enemy. It is only the natural unfolding of life's cycle. We fear death because we grasp tightly to the belief of permanence, to the illusion of mine and me. But when we see beyond that illusion, fear dissolves. From that day onward, the Buddha dedicated his life to sharing this wisdom. He walked from village to village, barefoot, speaking not only to kings and scholars, merchants, and even beggars. His presence was like a gentle flame that lit countless hearts. People who once lived in fear found clarity in his words. He spoke not of God's demanding offerings, but of compassion, mindfulness, and freedom. Years he traveled tirelessly, gathering a community of monks and lay followers, planting seeds of wisdom that would spread across centuries. After his passing, his disciples preserved his teachings with devotion. They gathered in councils, reciting his words together so they would not be lost. As centuries passed, the Dharma spread beyond India's borders. Emperor Ashoka, one of India's most powerful rulers, embraced Buddhism after witnessing the devastation of war. He sent monks to faraway land Sri Lanka, Central Asia, and later China. The wisdom crossed mountains and seas, taking root in different cultures, transforming into Theravada, Mahayana, and Vajrayana traditions. Each tradition expressed the Dharma in its own voice. Yet all carried the same luminous heart, that freedom from fear and suffering is possible for everyone, even in those ancient days. One truth shone clearly. People feared death just as we do today, but the Buddha's answer was gentle and timeless. Death is not the end. It is a reminder to live fully, to live wisely, and to live with love in our world today. Centuries after the Buddha walked the earth, his followers continue to live by the rhythm of his teachings. From the quiet mountains of Tibet to the bustling streets of Bangkok, from the serene temples of Kyoto to meditation halls in the West. The life of a Buddhist is both simple and profound. It is a life shaped not by wealth or power, but by humility, awareness, and devotion. In monasteries, monks and nuns rise before the first light of dawn. Their day begins with chanting the deep, resonant recitation of ancient sutras. These chants are not just words. They are vibrations of peace sent into the world, prayers of compassion for all living beings. Afterward, they walk barefoot through villages, carrying their bowls for alms. This is not begging, but a sacred exchange the lay community offers. Food, and the monks offer their spiritual presence. It is a reminder that life is interdependent, that giving and receiving flow together like the current of a river inside homes. Families gather at small altars, placing fresh flowers, candles and incense before a statue of the Buddha. The fragrance of incense rises like a gentle reminder of impermanence. The smoke drifts and disappears, just as all moments in life do. Festivals to mark the Buddhist's calendar with joy and reflection. On Vesak, for example, people celebrate the Buddha's birth, enlightenment, and passing into nirvana. Streets glow with lanterns, temples overflow with devotees, and acts of kindness ripple through communities as people free caged birds, donate to the poor, and meditate together. Beyond rituals, the daily practice of Buddhism is rooted in mindfulness, awareness of each breath, each step, each action. In the marketplace, a Buddhist might practice patience while waiting in line. At work, one may act with honesty and fairness. In family life, compassion is shown in gentle words and small acts of love. The path is not about retreating from the world, but about walking through it with a heart full of clarity. Meditation remains at the center of Buddhist practice, both for monks and lay people. Sitting in silence, observing the breath, and watching the mind, practitioners learn to see thoughts rise and fall like waves in the ocean. In these moments, fear begins to dissolve. The mind discovers its own stillness, its own strength. Chanting mantras, reciting prayers, or simply being present in daily tasks all lead to the same realization. Peace is already within us, waiting to be uncovered. And perhaps most importantly, Buddhist life is guided by compassion. A mother caring for her child, a stranger offering help to another, a community gathering to support those in need. Of these are seen as spiritual acts. To live as a Buddhist is to recognize the suffering of others as our own, and to respond with kindness. Even the smallest gesture, a smile, a word of encouragement, can become a meditation of the heart. Through these practices, death is not ignored but embraced as part of the cycle of existence. Every ritual, every chant, every act of kindness is a gentle training in letting go. Just as incense fades, just as flowers wilt, so too does life pass. But rather than filling hearts with despair, this truth fills them with gratitude for the present moment. And so, in the quiet rhythm of Buddhist life, we see the timeless wisdom of the Buddha living in temples, in homes, in daily acts of kindness, and in the stillness of the human heart. At the very heart of Buddhism lies not rituals or traditions, but a philosophy that touches the essence of human existence. It begins with a simple yet profound truth. Life is marked by impermanence. Everything changes, seasons turn, flowers bloom and wither, bodies grow and decay, moments rise and pass. Our suffering begins when we forget this truth and cling to what cannot be held forever. The Buddha expressed this wisdom through the Four Noble Truths, his first great teaching. He taught that life contains suffering, birth, aging, illness, and death touch all of us. This is not a pessimistic view, but an honest recognition of the human condition. The second truth reveals the cause of this suffering, craving, attachment, and the endless desire for permanence. The third truth offers hope. Suffering can be overcome. And the fourth truth points to the path that leads there, the Noble Eightfold Path, a way of living with right understanding, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. These principles are not commandments carved in stone, but compassionate guides for daily living. They remind us to walk gently, to speak truthfully, to act with kindness, and to see clearly. Each step on the path is like a lamp, lighting the darkness of fear, showing us that liberation is possible, not in another life alone, but here and now. In this very breath, beyond these truths, Buddhism blossoms with practices of the heart. Compassion, or karu, is the wish for all beings to be free from suffering. Loving kindness, or metta, is the radiant extension of goodwill to all friends, strangers, even those who have harmed us. These practices dissolve the barriers of self and other, teaching us that every being longs for happiness. Every being fears pain. When we see this, our hearts open, and our lives become vessels of peace. The Buddha also spoke of mindfulness seti, the art of being present, to drink tea with awareness, to listen without distraction, to breathe with intention. These simple acts transform ordinary life into a spiritual practice. It is clarity, the recognition of reality as it is. In this clarity, fear of death begins to loosen, for we see that each moment already holds birth and death. Each breath enters, each breath leaves. We are always becoming, always dissolving, always alive in change. And perhaps the most transformative teaching is the realization of anat, the truth of no self. We are not fixed beings locked in a fragile body, but part of an endless flow of causes and conditions. Just as a wave is not separate from the ocean, we are not separate from life itself. To fear death is to believe we are only the wave. To awaken is to realize we are also the sea. In that realization, death is no longer an enemy, but a natural movement of existence. This philosophy does not demand blind belief. It invites inquiry. The Buddha urged his followers not to accept teachings because he said them, but to test them in their own hearts and lives. And when we do, we find that compassion softens anger. Mindfulness brings peace to chaos. And impermanence teaches us to cherish every fleeting moment. These are not abstract ideas. They are living truths that transform the way we see ourselves and the world. Through these core principles, Buddhism offers a timeless gift: the courage to live without clinging, and the strength to face death without fear. It reminds us that our lives are not measured by how tightly we hold on, but by how deeply we love, how freely we give, and how peacefully we let go. Even after more than 25 centuries, the voice of the Buddha has not faded, has only grown stronger. His wisdom has traveled across continents, across languages, across ages, reaching into the very fabric of our modern world. Today, in a time when life moves faster than ever, when stress and uncertainty weigh heavily on hearts, the teachings of Buddhism feel more relevant than ever before. One of the most profound gifts Buddhism has offered to the modern world is the practice of mindfulness. Once taught in forests and monasteries, it is now practiced in hospitals, schools, workplaces, and homes. Doctors use it to help patients heal from stress and anxiety. Teachers use it to guide children toward focus and calm. Even in the busiest cities, people pause for a few moments of breathing, of awareness, of stillness. This simple practice, rooted in the Buddha's insight, has shown the world that peace is not somewhere far away, is here, in each breath, waiting to be found. Buddhism has also influenced how we understand compassion in our global society. In a world often divided by race, religion, or nation, the Buddhist teaching of interdependence reminds us that we are not separate. Every action we take ripples outward. A smile, a word of kindness, an act of generosity, these small things carry immeasurable power. In an age where loneliness and division are so common, this truth shines like a light, that to care for another is to care for ourselves. Because, in reality, we are deeply connected. The principles of nonviolence and compassion have also touched movements for peace and justice. Leaders like Thich Nhat Hanh and the Dalai Lama have shown how the Buddha's message can bring healing even in times of conflict. They remind us that true strength is not found in anger or revenge, but in forgiveness and understanding. Even beyond religious practice, these values guide how people choose to live, how communities grow, and how nations can dream of harmony in the personal lives of millions. Buddhism offers not an escape from reality, but a way to embrace it with courage. It teaches us to meet suffering not with despair, but with wisdom, to face death not with fear, but with acceptance, and to live every moment as though it were precious because it truly is. For what is life but a series of fleeting moments, each one carrying within it the chance to love, to grow, to awaken? So we return to the question we began with. Why do we fear death so much? Perhaps because we think it takes everything away from us. But the Buddha's timeless answer tells us another story. Death does not steal, transforms. It is the reminder that life is a gift, that clinging only deepens our pain, and that freedom lies in letting go. When we live with compassion, when we practice mindfulness, when we understand impermanence, death is no longer darkness. It becomes a doorway into peace. And so, the message of the Buddha is as radiant now as it was beneath the Bodhi tree. He whispers across centuries, do not be afraid. Live with kindness. Cherish this breath. Let go of what is not permanent. In doing so, you will find a peace that no loss, no sorrow, not even death itself can ever take away. The Buddha's wisdom is not bound to the past. It is alive in every heart that chooses love over fear, compassion over cruelty, peace over turmoil. And if we carry that wisdom within us, then perhaps death is not an end at all, but only the beginning of a deeper, timeless freedom.